In the last stream, we were working on setting up this large multi-block smeltery from the casting mod to allow us to centralize all of our casting endeavors into one giant, fully automated multi-block structure, which is going to make our automation of future tiers of Technium, I think, just that little bit easier. Now, between streams, what I've gone ahead and done is reconfigured a few of the setups that we kind of already had set up, but that were broken by the creation of this smeltery. And so over here, I've moved together and centralized the making of the leather. The setup is still the same. We still have the cloche feeding into two compactors and then going down into the storage drawer. The same is true for this compactor making black bricks. The same is true for this rock washer making the flint. And the same is true, of course, for the freezer here, turning clay into snowballs. The only thing that's changed a little bit is this setup right here for the entro crystals. The system is basically still the same. We have the growth accelerator pointing at what is going to be, hopefully, not a block of Certus quartz. That's going to grow the entro crystals. We then have the annihilation plane hooked up on its own little sub-network. In fact, if we look real quick with the facade wrench, you can see that I've put down a quartz fiber right there to make sure that the storage bus and the annihilation plane still get power, but are not connected to the rest of the system, therefore forcing the annihilation plane to break the entro crystals when they are fully grown and place them into this drawer. Everything else is kind of just hooked up around with some dense cable over here. And other than that, I think things around the base are mostly the same. I've done a little bit of organizational work. So over here, I've kind of moved some of the crafters to make it symmetrical. I've also put down a few more crafting co-processing units to increase the crafting on our smaller crafting CPUs. Over here, though, the only thing we need to do now to actually get this whole system up and running is grab some ender dust, tell this export bus here to export ender dust continuously, and then place a crafting card in to allow our system to take the ender pearls we have and use them to make ender dust for this crystal fixer. That, of course, is going to allow the crystal fixer to work continuously, meaning that hopefully we only have to make one more of these budding, fully entroized Fluix blocks. Of course, to do that, we need to get another Entro seed, and we need to use that on a block of Fluix. Now, the Entro seed does require unstable matter, and that kind of takes us to what we were working on at the very end of the last episode. We were working on setting up the automation for the ultimate Technium over here, and we mostly achieved that. You'll see that in here, we are automatically receiving almost everything, and we're almost fully backed up on everything as well. There were just a few things that we're not making fast enough. Those are antimatter pellets, nanite, and replica. So the nanite, I think, is potentially just a draw configuration problem. I think over here, we just need to make sure that we put one of those remote draw upgrades into this draw. And I think that should take the nanite online and should start sending it around over to the ultimate Technium machine. And it does, cool. The other two are slightly bigger problems. The replica is a problem because we're not making the Enderman predictions fast enough. And so I think what's happening here is almost all of them are going straight down into this loot fabricator, which is making ender pearls. And of course, right at the end of the last episode, we did set up a system with all of these disintegrators where we had crafters with crafting cards that are set to automatically export ender pearls to our disintegrators, basically deleting all of our ender pearls actively, which wasn't ideal. So between streams, I have gone ahead and basically turned off all of these exporters. The only one that is still exporting is the one for cobblestone. All of the rest of them have at least temporarily been turned off, just to make sure that we do still have some resources to craft with in today's stream, because we do need some ender pearls. But the fact that we are kind of using the ender pearls so quickly does mean that we're not really getting enough of these replica ingots to make the replica blocks. There are a few things we can do to fix that. We could, if we wanted to, get another Enderman data model, level that up to self-aware, and use it as like a dedicated data model for making predictions for the replica ingots. But one thing that has been suggested quite a few times is that it might not be a terrible idea to set up yet another line of machines downstairs for the dimensional replica ore. So much like we're doing currently for platinum, we're doing it for diamonds, we're doing it for uranium, and we're doing it for gold, we can do the exact same thing for replica ore. And if we do that, we're of course just going to generate a passive and unlimited amount of that replica ore that we can then process and turn into replica blocks. And that's probably going to be the more sustainable way to do that going forward. The final thing that we're not really producing enough of is antimatter, and the antimatter, of course, is made using the unstable matter over here, which we also need for the aforementioned Entra seed. The reason for that is that we don't have anywhere near enough nether matter. The nether matter we were making with glowstone. The glowstone is craftable, it's just really, really slow and doesn't really have a lot of nether element inside of it. Real quick, just to kind of give us a bit of a head start here, because we need quite a bit of unstable matter to progress, because the plan for today is going to be to start on the Hellish questline. To do that, as we saw in the last episode, we need to get a fluid injector to make the heat protection curio. That's going to allow us to survive in the nether. We also need to make a nether portal using these nether portal frames. So we need 10 of these, each of which requires an ultimate Technium machine frame, which is going to require a fair amount of ultimate Technium, more than we currently have. And so to get us kickstarted, I do think nether quartz is going to be our best bet here. It has the same amount of nether as a glowstone does, but we can make it much easier because we have a decent amount of black quartz here, and we can just very quickly run that through our enrichment chamber to turn it into regular nether quartz. And so real quick, I'm going to go ahead and throw this into here. We could also look actually at compacting that potentially into like nether quartz blocks to make it just a bit quicker to process. But real quick, if I go ahead and throw some of this in here, and in fact, if I just grab all of our black quartz, or at least as much of it as I can throw into this enrichment chamber, that's going to get us a ton of nether quartz. We can run that through our disintegrator. That's going to make some more of this unstable matter. And by default, that should automatically get turned into antimatter over here. And that antimatter, of course, should be exported around to the ultimate Technium machine frame. So it shouldn't really take too long for us to get enough antimatter pellets to make enough ultimate Technium to get us into the nether. I will quickly try and siphon one of the unstable matters here so that we can hopefully use it to make another Entra seed. So once we have one unstable matter, we can go ahead and turn that back on. This unstable matter can be used to make that Entra seed we were talking about. And then if we just go ahead and grab one Fluix block here, we should then be able to get this Entra system back online. So get rid of you, throw down the Fluix block, and boom, we get our Entra seed. Cool. So now, whilst we wait for the antimatter to come in for our ultimate Technium, we can probably look at setting up that dimensional ore extractor line of machinery for the replica ingots. Now, to do that, we could do what we've done every single time, which is just make one of each machine here, make another dimensional ore extractor, and then set the whole thing up and let it go. But I do think that going forward, we're going to have to do this quite a few more times. Right now, we have 4 dimensional ore extractors. I think by the time the end of the pack rolls around, it's quite possible we end up with way more than 4 of these dimensional ore extractors and more than 4 of these lines of machinery. And so what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to teach our system how to make all of these machines and all of the parts required for the dimensional ore extractor, and then I think we should be able to set up a custom recipe to where we can request that our system make all of the machines and all of the items via one recipe click. I'll show you how we're going to do that in just a second once I've taught the system how to make everything else. Alright, so not too long later, and I have encoded patterns for all of the machines that we need, as well as patterns for the dimensional ore extractor, and all of the parts required that we didn't already have taught, things like the atomic disassembler and the dimensional machine frame. Those are also now taught in here. And so if we go ahead and teach our system how to make these by just putting them into the new plethora of interfaces that we have all the way over in the back corner there, we should now, in theory, be able to request all of the parts required for the setup downstairs. Now, the key here to what I'm wanting to do is I'm wanting to get another one of these pattern providers, which, again, we should have the ability to request in the system. We can. And I'm going to put that pattern provider just onto any old chest. We'll also request a chest as well. That should be much faster. And the idea here, for now, let's put it like right here, and let's just have this right here as well, pointing directly down. Cool. The idea here is that what I'm going to do in here, I'm going to select processing patterns. So this is going to allow us to set a custom recipe. And I'm going to teach the system a custom recipe that pretends to need all of these items. And so we're just going to drag over every single one of the machines that our system now knows how to make. We're also going to drag over the dimensional ore extractor. You can scroll down here to add even more stuff. We're also going to add 26 quartz glass. Again, here you can drag this. Make sure you don't do it like that. Let me shift click to get rid of those, and then let me middle click to change this to 26. Set. Then let me quickly find what I have just gotten rid of. It is the enrichment chamber. We can add that back like so. Perfect. And then the last item is just the 43 reinforced machine casing. Again, if we drag that kind of carefully round into here somewhere, like so, we can middle click, change that to 43, set. And then on the output, we do have to tell it what it's making. It doesn't really matter though. So I could, for example, just drag over the dimensional ore extractor, like so, and then click encode. And now, in theory, if I put this in here and I go back to my crafting terminal, if I type in ore extractor, we have this recipe for the dimensional ore extractor placer. If I click on this and click next, the system thinks that it needs to make all of the parts required to make this happen. It also thinks it's missing 2 purification chambers. I thought we taught our system how to make the purification chamber, but on the off chance we didn't, let me just quickly throw that in over here as well. Boom. Let's try that one more time. There we go. And so now if I click start, what's going to happen is it's going to craft all of those items, and I do this every time. I should have made a barrel here, not a chest, because the barrel is actually openable when there is a block above it, unlike the chest, which is not. Let me do that real quick there, so that is doable. But what's going to happen now is our system is going to make all of the machines and all of the parts and basically everything that I need to set up a dimensional ore extractor and the associated line of machines. I don't have to do any of that crafting manually. All I have to do is sit here and wait, and once it's done, I'll get the pop-up in the top right, and then I can come down and just put everything together, and it should just work. What I will then have to do is I will have to cancel the craft, because the craft is going to be expecting a dimensional ore extractor back, and it's not actually going to get a dimensional ore extractor, because of course it doesn't exist. There is no dimensional ore extractor that's going to be made. This is a fake recipe, but doing this just allows us to request multiple things at once, as opposed to having to go through and individually request a chemical dissolution chamber, then a chemical washer, then a chemical crystallizer, then a chemical injection chamber, etc., etc. You get the idea. And so hopefully going forward, that little recipe there is just going to make our lives that little bit easier. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put even more quartz in here to make sure we get even more antimatter, which should be getting sent around to here. It is. And I'm going to go ahead and set up the full line of machines required for the dimensional replica ore. In terms of making the dimensional replica ore, the first one that is, it shouldn't be too difficult. We just need to take 1 deep slate replica ore and place it into our dimensional infuser, and we can make the deep slate replica ore with 12 replica dust and 12 blank stone ore. Real quick, the end result here looks like this. It just gives us all of the stuff that we need, which is great. And chat has also pointed out that a while ago we did make the copy-paste gadget as well. And so I think it's also entirely possible that we should just be able to go ahead and use this, like we did at the beginning of the pack, to select the area of machines that we want to copy, and then just copy and paste the placing of the lineup as well to make our lives, again, just that little bit easier. We just want to make sure as well that we cancel the craft. So just click cancel, and that's done. And again, we can request the same thing again if we ever want it redoing in the future. So just like before here, all we need to do is hold down the hotkey, which for me is bound to numpad 6. We can swap this to copy, and then we want to right-click on one coordinate and then shift right-click on the other. I've just built a little pillar here to make sure we can kind of build the cube. The pillar is obviously not required, and in fact, we can go ahead and get rid of it. And now we have this ready to go. And so now if we swap from copy to paste, you can see that we now have access to this little line of machinery, and it's kind of in a weird position, but all of the stuff is there. All we would need to do now is, of course, find out where we want to put this and anchor it to move it up. Now, what I'm thinking I might do is if we go ahead and anchor this here, we can then go to the settings menu and kind of move this up. And my thought process is that we could potentially have this stacked directly on top of the last machine, especially if we do something like this and kind of confirm it inside of the last machine. That should work perfectly and should leave us with excess reinforced machine casing, because I believe that we can... Oh no, we can't do this. We learned this downstairs, of course, because we can't have the dimensional ore extractor inside of the top of the other machine. So this will work if we push it up by 1, like this, but it won't work if we try and embed it. So real quick, if we just right-click, it's going to place down all of the resources we have. Things we don't have, like the pipes, are not going to get placed down, but anything that we do have in our inventory that matches will get placed down. We can then go ahead and put this away for now. We don't need it, and we've effectively placed down all of those machines without really having to do too much work at all. Now, the configurations are not copied over, so we are going to have to go ahead and grab the configuration card that we made before, and we can use this to go ahead and just copy over all of the settings to get this back online. Up on the surface as well, I have gone ahead and started the backlogging of replica dust. We can go ahead and turn this back on now because we have more than enough replica dust. All we need is just, I think, one blank ore, and back over inside of our combiner, which is this guy, we can do this, and that's going to get us our deep slate replica ore, which we can then throw into our dimensional infuser. It doesn't really matter which dimensional infuser we go for. I guess I'm going to go for this one because it's not doing anything at the moment, and the skystone doesn't really matter too much, and that is going to get us the dimensional replica ore. Cool. And so now we just need to do some configuration, kind of copy and pasting. We need to get another storage drawer, but that should basically be dimensional replica ore up and running. Alright, so a little bit of tinkering later, and this is actually working. I've copied over all of the configurations. I've thrown down a quantum entangler here to give power to these machines. Also, it turns out you can put a quantum entangler behind the dimensional ore extractor. That is kind of technically part of the multi-block, like it's inside the multi-block structure, but that still does work just fine. It's in the gap behind there, so we could do that for some future tiers as well. That's what's providing power to the dimensional ore extractor. And yeah, this is all running. Right now, we only have chemical upgrades in with the purification chamber and the chemical injection chamber, but of course, if we wanted to, we could look at getting a bunch more speed and energy upgrades and throwing those into all of these machines as well to make things that little bit faster. At the very least, of course, it's probably a good idea for us to get energy upgrades into all of these just to massively reduce the amount of power used, but as well, it's possible that some speed upgrades kind of strategically placed into some of those machines could get us increased replica production without too much of a hit to power. But now all of that is being made and is being sent around, and so really all we need to do, the final piece of this puzzle, is getting another storage drawer, which we can put down right about here. That's going to allow us to extract out the elite technium that we're currently storing in this guy, like so. That should already be connected, but I have a feeling that's not going to work. The remote group upgrades tend to break when you break and replace the drawer. If I put that back, does that work? It totally does work, and you'll see we've already set it up to extract and send it around, and so it is being sent around, and we are now finally actually making the ultimate technium automatically. I did go ahead and throw down a compacting drawer over here just to make sure that all of the replica ingots are automatically turned into blocks, thus saving our A2 system from having to do the extra stage of actually doing the craft. But now it's just a case of kind of waiting, I guess, for all of the ultimate technium to come in that we can then use to actually make ourselves the nether portal. While we wait for that, one thing I do want to do here actually is I would like to do my first bit of research as far as ultimate technium is concerned, because we have of course now unlocked the ultimate research chapter, and the one that's really standing out to me is the time crystal quest here, because the time crystal quest is going to allow us to craft a time in a bottle, and it's also going to allow us to craft a time in a bottle charger, which I believe is going to allow us to turn power into time inside of our time in a bottle, which, if that's any good, could be crazy powerful. Now, it is a little expensive. To get the time in a bottle blueprint, we do need almost 50 ultimate research, which means we're going to need to use 5 of our ultimate technium ingots here to make this happen. But I think it's probably worth the investment, because the time in a bottle is going to make it that much quicker and easier for us to get more of really anything that we want going forward. So once we have 50 ultimate research, we then just need either 8 polonium or 8 plutonium. We have got more plutonium than we do polonium, so we'll take 8 of those. And then back over here, is this done inside of the researcher? It is. Boom and boom. That's going to go ahead and get us the time in a bottle blueprint. Once this is done, we can take it out, throw it in over here, boom and boom, and that is going to go ahead and start making some time crystals. And again, as we've done many times before, we can kind of spread this out like this to maximize the speed at which we make multiple different time crystals. And quite a while later, we now have our first 3 time crystals. I'm going to go ahead and get another 3 of these cooking, because we do need even more of them, especially if we do want to make the time in a bottle charger. But with just 2 of these, we should now be able to craft a regular Minecraft clock and then from there, craft up the time in a bottle. For those who don't know, this is an item that stores time the longer you hold it. So you'll see, as I'm talking here, it's climbing 6, 7, 8 seconds, 9 seconds, 10 seconds. It's getting more and more time stored within it. And the idea here is that we can use that stored time to speed up machines around the base. So for example, over here, this guy is actually fully blocked up on generalized Enderman predictions. The same is also true over here of the generalized overworld predictions. And so actually, we could do with making a couple of either storage upgrades or void upgrades, actually. I don't know. We've already put a storage upgrade into this one, so I guess a void upgrade is the next port of call. And I'll put one in here as well, just to keep that all going. But over here, this guy, as soon as it gets rid of its predictions, should be ready to go. Oh, of course, I did disconnect this when I was trying to specifically get replica, and in doing so I also disconnected it from there as well, which is kind of part of the problem. Let me reconnect that back up to both the loot fabricator for ender pearls and also to this drawer. That's going to bring this back online. But now, for example, if I shift right click on here, I've doubled the speed of this machine for 27 more seconds, 30 seconds in total, at the cost of some of the time in the bottle. You'll see we currently have 46, but the total accumulated is like 1 minute and 20, and that's because we used about 30 seconds worth of time to double the speed of this machine for 30 seconds. And the more time that you have in the bottle, the more accelerating you can do. You can right-click again to double it to 4x, then 8x, then 16x, and if you have a lot of time in your bottle, you can make machines very, very fast by spending that time. Now, normally, you just have to hold it in your inventory for a very long time to make that work, but in this pack, we have the time in a bottle charger, which I believe is a machine that's going to allow us to turn our power into time inside of the bottle. I am going to spend an ultimate Technium machine to do this, which is a little expensive, but I'm intrigued as to how this works. So if we were to go ahead and put this down, really anywhere where there is power available, like right here, this is going to start to fill up on power. And I'm assuming the idea is we put this in, and look at that, it really starts to kind of rapidly climb in terms of how much time is stored inside of it. Now, currently, we do have just under 1 billion FE inside of here, but at the start of today's stream, this was at over 2 billion, and so we are actively losing power here quite quickly. I don't know if that's all down to the time in a bottle. I'll take that out just to see how fast are we losing power. Oh, we're gaining power without that. So without it, we are gaining power. With it, we are losing power. So it is a quick way to allow us to accelerate some stuff, but it does come with the trade-off that it uses a very, very large amount of power. And so it might be worth us looking at getting even more power generation up and running before we start using that too much. Speaking of power generation, whilst I was waiting for the time crystals to come in, I did put the energy upgrades into all of these machines. I also upgraded the machines that could be upgraded to their factory versions, and I've also put a couple of speed upgrades into a few of the machines at the back here just to make it a little bit faster and make sure that we are utilizing these factory machines as much as possible. Also, when I checked, it was still the replica that was the limiting factor in terms of how fast we were making ultimate Technium. It looks now like the limiting factor, surprisingly, is molten mob essence. And that's because down here, this fluidizer is turned off. I'm not quite sure why it was turned off. I don't know if it like resets on its own, or if it resets maybe when the pack updates or something, but the machine had turned off, that's fine. Now that it's back on, hopefully, we're going to start to get ultimate Technium in way faster, and hopefully we're not too far away from being able to build this nether portal to allow us to pass through into the nether. Of course, before that, we do need the fluid injector, and I think the fluid injector is probably makeable with the ultimate Technium that we already have. It's also probably going to be a good idea to teach our system how to make the ultimate Technium machine frame here, because I have a feeling we're going to be making quite a few of those going forward. Let's throw you into one of our molecular assemblers, like so. And then in terms of actually getting that ultimate Technium machine frame, we are just missing the platinum gear, and of course we have in our inventory the ultimate Technium nuggets. Platinum we should have, we totally do. And then in terms of making a platinum gear, we can either use the metal press or the solidifier. I guess for our purposes here, it's probably going to be in our best interest, at least for now, to teach our system how to make this using the metal press. If we end up needing this for a Technium, which it doesn't look like we do, then we could have added it to the smeltery, but given that we're not going to need a limitless amount of it for the making of any particular Technium, I think we can quite safely just throw this into here, like so, and then we should be able to go ahead and request that ultimate Technium machine frame, which should then allow us to make the fluid injector. For that, we need 6 fluidizer casing and 2 ultimate fluid tanks. Thankfully, all stuff that our system knows how to make, but glass is the thing that we are out of. It might just be the case over here that we increase the amount of sand that is sent, kind of in a similar way to what we've done with the stone here. If we change this to like 20 sand, that's going to export way more sand into this multi-block controller, which should massively increase the speed at which we make glass. So the glass is still our limiting factor, even with the extra sand in there. Since we first set this up, you can now actually put compressed sand in, so either single compressed or double compressed in. Right now it's not working for us. The reason for that is that the compressed sand here produces 9,000 millibuckets of molten glass, and right now we have our tank partition. So you'll see here we've got up to 180,000 millibuckets of capacity, and it looks like we have loads of capacity, but up at the top here we actually have our 180,000 millibuckets partitioned into 28 kind of sections that are each only 6,428 in size, and so that's not quite big enough. There's a few things we could do here. We could get rid of a few of the regulators. That would lower the number of partitions down from 28 to, you know, say 20 or 15, however many we wanted. Or alternatively, we could just make the smeltery itself taller, in doing so kind of increasing the overall capacity, which would then increase the size of each partition, and then from there we'd be able to melt even more sand even more quickly, because even now, without using the compressed sand, you'll see that from time to time, some of the sand doesn't smelt, because it all gets turned into molten glass, and then before the molten glass is turned into regular glass, the new sand gets in and doesn't smelt right away, because again, there's not enough space for it to do so. You'll see here, this is not smelting because there's no space. It takes a little bit of time, there's a bit of a delay on that coming back in, and so if we make it taller, like we've just done, we've increased the capacity, and therefore increased the capacity of each partition, and given how cheap these black bricks are, I feel like there's not really any downside to making this a bit taller, and in the future, if we wanted to, we could also look at putting down compacting drawers for our sand and our stone, and then we could just go ahead and export the compressed sand and the compressed stone, as opposed to exporting 20 stone and 20 sand. And with that extra glass, I've gone ahead and requested 2 more ultimate tanks, so now we should finally be able to make the fluid injector. Quest complete. And with that fluid injector, we can now combine liquid nitrogen with another one of these curios, which we haven't made for a while, but that's going to get us the heat curio to survive in the nether. So our nitrogen is available down here. We don't necessarily have to put this down right next to the nitrogen. Let me check if this requires power. It does indeed require power. I guess in that scenario, speaking of power, it would seem that we are out. Are we actually out of power? We're not out of power. It is just my wireless crafting terminal that's out of power. Thankfully, that is rechargeable. And very quickly, actually, inside of the induction matrix. Let me throw that back in there. We're not too far away, actually, from being able to set up some wireless power to charge that wirelessly going forward. For now, though, in terms of actually making the curio here, we do need 10 buckets of liquid nitrogen. So let me throw this down, I guess like right about here, at least temporarily. We could throw the curio in, and then it is a bit awkward, but if we just do something like this, we can kind of very quickly move 10 buckets of nitrogen over into the fluid injector, and I'm fairly certain that we only need to do this once to get the one heat curio that's then going to allow us to stay in the nether kind of indefinitely. And so once we have that, then we are just at the point of needing the 10 nether portal frames, which is going to require 60 ultimate technium nuggets, which is going to require that we get 7 ultimate technium ingots, which I don't think we should be too far away from. We already have 6 nuggets there. We've got 2 ingots on us, and back over inside of our ultimate technium machine, with the faster glass, we have managed to get up to 7. Okay, so perfect. So if I throw that back in the system, can I get 7 more ultimate technium machine frames? I almost can. Our system just does not know currently how to turn ultimate technium ingots into ultimate technium nuggets. We most certainly should look at getting compacting drawers down for all of our different tiers of technium ingots, but the short-term plaster solution to this problem is to do something like that, and then try again requesting those. Perfect. Let's also go ahead and request the 60 obsidian glow ingots that we're going to need as well, and then other than that, we just need 20 dimensional dust, which we can also go ahead and request. We are just missing 1 advanced technium ingot, which is not being made over here because of the fact that we don't have enough crushed deep slate coming in. I believe we're making crushed deep slate down here, and it looks like the limiting factor on this is actually just the speed of these machines, which currently don't have any speed or energy upgrades at all. That is a very fixable problem then. Let me do this and this. Let's also do this and this. That should massively increase the speed of our crushed deep slate production, which hopefully is then going to bring this advanced technium back online. And a little bit of dimensional dust later. We should now, I think, have everything that we need in order to make 10 nether portal frames. Never mind, I completely miscalculated that. We needed 7 ingots to make 10 ultimate technium machine frames. So let me quickly get 3 more of those. Start. That should give us everything we need to make 10 nether portal frames. And I've been told, actually, that the heat protection curio here only lasts 5 minutes, which means if we want to stay in the nether for longer than 5 minutes, we have to upgrade to the heat protection 2 curio, which will give us a total of 10 minutes, and then eventually to the heat protection 3 curio, which will last forever. But it turns out I was about as incorrect as I could be earlier when I was talking about using this temporarily with the nitrogen. So we are going to have to kind of set this up in a more automated way to get more of those heat 1 curios, because they do only last a certain amount of time. For now, though, we do need to find a place to put down our nether portal so we can actually head on through to the nether. Now, unfortunately, the nether portal here is like an even number wide, so it's not like I can put it right at the center of the base there, which kind of makes me think that I'm going to have to maybe just hide it out somewhere. Alright, so I've gone ahead and thrown it down over in the corner for now. I have been told by Ben that you can make this portal any size, just like a regular Minecraft portal, and so at some point, once we have more abundant ultimate technium, we could look at making this bigger and putting it in a more centralized and useful place. For now, though, let me make sure that I have my curio on, and let's also make sure that we have maybe a couple of flight blocks with us as well, so that we can actually fly once we get through to the nether. In terms of making more flight blocks, we just need some more basic technium machine frames. Let me get like 5 more of those. Missing basic technium nuggets. Again, this is one of those situations where our system just does not know how to craft the basic technium into nuggets just yet. I'm pretty sure that's the case anyway. Let me try that again. It is indeed. Start. And all we need to do, of course, is just run those through the elite research crafters with our flight block blueprint. And once we have our 5th flight block, let's head on through. And I'm assuming kind of a regular nether here, all things considered. I actually don't know if it's going to be like a Skyblock nether, given that we're on a Skyblock pack. But we are about to find out. It is indeed a completely normal nether, which is to be expected. Cool. So the idea here, looking at the quest line, first of all, is that we can claim some of our quests, but it looks like they want us to get netherrack. That is kind of the easiest part of the equation, because we can just go ahead and mine some, and then maybe try and make sure we don't get burned and destroyed by lava. We can then compress that and use it to make a blank netherite ore inside of a dimensional infuser. That's fine. We can also find some of the nether trees if we have any of the biomes nearby. I do see a crimson forest up on the top right, and also on the left, actually. I don't see a warped forest, although I'm assuming we could find one of those fairly easily. Let me do a quick /home, actually, so we don't burn through our curio too quickly. Annoyingly, it doesn't really tell you how much time you have left. There's just like a progress bar there, which is interesting. But really, the main part of the nether questline is using the digital miner here to acquire a bunch of these different resources. So the digital miner, for those who don't know, is kind of like a quarry that Mechanism adds that lets you harvest a bunch of resources without actually having to mine for those resources. So I'm going to go ahead and teach our system how to make it. Not because I necessarily think we're going to need multiple of these, but just because it's going to be easier to craft it that way. So in terms of actually making it, we do need to teach it how to make the Robot and the Logistical Sorter. Neither of those, thankfully, are too difficult. We've been making these logistical sorters since the beginning of the pack. We'll encode that. That is going to require that we encode a few other little bits here, but I think that's fine and probably worth doing as well, just to make our lives a little bit easier. The Robot is also not too bad. In fact, it looks like most things there are kind of already taught. Let's get all of those into their respective molecular assemblers. Anyone will do. And it looks like we have everything we need. Start. So that's going to make the digital miner for us. Once we have that, it should really just be a case of taking our quantum entangler porter over to the nether with us, and with that we should be able to power the digital miner and start receiving some ores. Now I am going to go ahead and also grab a chest. An iron chest here will do for now, although I guess eventually we might even want to use the quantum entangler porter to automatically send all of the resources back through to the overworld. One thing we are going to have to do is we are going to have to make sure that the power generation here in the overworld is chunk loaded. We can do that with FTB chunks. So if you press F3G, it will show you the chunk boundaries. We have kind of awkwardly built this on a bit of a chunk boundary, but that's fine. In here, all we need to do is click FTB chunks map, click on claimed chunks, and then these are claimed. You just left click to claim. You then just want to shift left click on chunks that you already have claimed, and that will force load those chunks. And so I'm going to go ahead and force load all of these. We do have a limit of 25 force loaded chunks, and so we do kind of have to somewhat choose which chunks we do want to load and which chunks we don't. For the most part, most of these don't need to be loaded while we're in the nether, so that's fine. As long as the ones that have the power generation are loaded while we're in the nether, it should be fine. We also actually probably want to make sure that we keep at least one chunk available for the nether itself, because over in the nether, we want to actually chunk load the digital miner to make sure that it continues to work, even if we are not there in the nether to babysit it. So here, we'll throw down the digital miner. We can throw down our quantum entangler porter next to the power port, make sure this is set to power output, and make sure that all of these are set to output with auto eject on. That should put power in the digital miner. It has. Then the outputs go right about here, so we'll put a chest there. We'll make sure in here that auto eject is set to on, and then from there, usually what I would do is I would go configuration, new filter, tag, and then type in C:\ors. And then that will just go ahead and scan whatever area we specify for ores. So here, the radius I think can be set up to 32. It can. And then you can specify the min and max Y level. So right now we're at Y level 83. It says it right here. And I guess, to be fair, in the nether, I don't really know what Y level things spawn at the most. I'll set the max Y level to 83, and I'll leave the minimum at 0 for now. And then if we go back and click start, it's going to go ahead and identify all of the ores within that radius, which is a pretty big radius because it's 32 blocks out, I think, in each direction. So we've found 10,000 blocks, and it's going to start to slowly but surely harvest all of those blocks. One thing we can do, real quick, F3G again, is we should probably have done this before we put the digital miner down, but we can go ahead and claim these chunks, and we can chunk load that chunk as well. I'm hopeful that having that chunk loaded will keep it working while I'm not here, but all I'm going to do real quick is grab 8 energy upgrades, because just like any other mechanism machine, we can go ahead and utilize energy and speed upgrades to make it more power efficient and to make it faster. There is also an anchor upgrade that you can make. The anchor upgrade is an upgrade that you can put into mechanism machines that allows them to chunk load themselves. This one actually just requires a little bit of diamond dust, which I think we can get either by crushing or enriching diamonds. That is indeed correct. And so if we did one of these real quick, that should give us the ability to make the anchor upgrade, at which point we should be able to chunk load the digital miner back here in the nether by just putting this into the upgrade slot. Cool. And that's going to keep the machine chunk loaded. From there, we can go ahead and add in our energy upgrades. And we can also, if we want, add in the speed upgrades. Right now it's using 89 FE per tick. If we put in all 8 speed upgrades, that does go up to 8,940 FE per tick, which is a little bit pricey. If we take a few of those out, that's going to bring it down quite a bit. It is, of course, going to make it much slower, but it does totally work. And the really nifty thing about the digital miner here, of course, is that you can really get specific on what ore you want to mine. Right now, I've just put in the tag C:\ors, and so it's harvesting any and all ores. But if you press F3 and H, you turn on advanced tooltips, and with advanced tooltips, you can see all of the tags that a given ore has. And so if I were to stop this and I were to go back, we can reset it, go back to configuration. If we were to change this tag, let's say we really wanted to get the nether ruby ore, and it does tell us here actually the Y levels at which you find these, we can hold shift to see the tags, and you'll see here if we do C:\ors/ruby, it should specifically look for the ruby ores. So let's give that a try. If I click save, now it's only looking for ruby ores. Again, if I click start, it's found 62 of them, and it's going to go ahead and harvest them. Nice. And so it's hopefully not going to be too difficult at all for us to get like the Nether Zinc ore and the Nether Peridot ore to then progress further in this questline. It does say specifically that we have to use Techopolis :netherite_ ore if we want to get netherite though. So let me quickly try that one as well. Techopolis :netherite_ ore. Save. And again, we can click start, and again, it's going to harvest the netherite. Now, interestingly, it has harvested it in scrap form, but what you can do is you can go ahead and turn on Silk Touch. That is going to massively increase the power consumption from 500 FE up to 6,000 FE, but if I click start there, it is going to go ahead and harvest that ancient debris in ancient debris form, which will indeed complete the quest there. I don't know if that's something we're going to have to do long term, because it looks like we kind of just need it in scrap form, or at least we can use it in scrap form. That, I'm assuming, is my 5 minutes up. It is. My curio has disappeared. Okay, so we definitely need to get another curio. Ideally, we would get the higher tier curio. I guess we could make the higher tier curio now that we have some netherite, but I don't know how good of an idea it is to use our netherite to make the higher tier curio and then just use the curio as usual. Ideally, I guess we'd want to start on the organic questline here. We'd want to start looking at acquiring some of these nether data models, of which we are going to need all of these, by the way, for the automation of Hellish Technium, because all of these produce the generalized nether predictions as a byproduct, and getting those generalized nether predictions would allow us to upgrade straight away to the tier 3 curio, which is going to last forever. To get started here, though, we do need to get some of those nether planks, and so I guess what we're going to have to do is make maybe a few more heat protection curios, head on through into the nether, and see if we can't find a warped forest biome. That is assuming we need both. I actually don't know if we do need both. We don't, so we might just be able to go to the crimson biome, get a bunch of crimson logs, and use those instead of having to look around for a warped forest. Okay, so I came back, and it turned out that we had 0 nitrogen. It turns out that our smeltery has been tearing through the nitrogen pretty quickly, and so what I have gone ahead and done here is kind of the same thing that we've done over here with our cobblestone melters, but here I've put down another tank for purifying water. There's a connector under here that is receiving the purified water via the XNet controller, and then now, instead of having just the 1 freezer, I've kind of quintupled that up to 5 freezers, so we're now making the nitrogen 5 times faster, and I'm going to move our fluid injector kind of over to here. That way, we should be able to hopefully power this fairly easily, although actually, now that I think about this, it probably makes a bit more sense to have this either here or like here. Here works, it just looks a little bit awkward, but it does work in terms of actually making the curios we need. Now, I also did kind of recklessly make 64 curios, which did use a decent chunk of our iron, but we do now have those for the future should we need them, and I'm hoping that we don't really need them that much. I'm hoping we don't need 64 curios before we get to this heat protection 3 curio. And so, as I was saying just a second ago, what I'm going to do now is head on back through, fly over using the flight blocks here to that crimson forest, and then see if we can't get a little bit of the crimson wood that we can then bring back to hopefully make lava planks. Once we have the lava planks, we can then make blazing sawdust by crushing those lava planks, and then from there we can use that blazing sawdust with an empowerer to make blaze powder. That does involve us getting started with the empowering questline. This one doesn't seem too difficult, but we are going to need both zinc and netherite to make a lot of the different parts here that we're going to need. And so I also might do a little bit more tinkering with the digital miner to make sure that we have enough zinc and enough netherite to actually set up the empowerer to allow us to actually make the blaze powder. And not too long later, I've managed to get over a stack of crimson stems, which we can craft, of course, into planks. And then I did go ahead and mine some more netherite scrap. I did it without the silk touch on, because right now I think that's the best choice for us. One thing we could have done if we wanted to is we could have got the ancient debris with the silk touch, and then we can use a fluid injector with eroding water to make more netherite scrap. This would have been the more efficient way to do it, but the eroding water would have required that we probably set up another thermal evaporation plant. It's possible in the future this is something we do have to do. For now, though, we actually only need 20 netherite scrap, I think, in order to get the empowerer up and running, and so I just did a little bit of mining the lesser efficient way. And right now the system is just mining for zinc, which we also have. I'll click stop because there's loads of zinc in there and we don't need that running continuously. Back here over at home, we should now be able to use our metallurgic infuser with gold to get some netherite. I say that we actually don't have a metallurgic infuser set up for gold, and so we are in fact going to have to make another metallurgic infuser on top of the ones we already have to allow us to actually do what we need to do with gold. And then as for the zinc here, surprisingly, or should I say annoyingly, it looks like we actually have to turn this into dimensional zinc ore and then process it into zinc. And I'm assuming that that kind of implies that we really need to set up another dimensional ore extractor if we want to get continuous zinc. And it looks like that's also kind of true for some other things like the dimensional quartz here as well. And so with that in mind, I guess we might as well go ahead and request another one of these dimensional ore extractors so that we get another set of the machinery. That does appear to be missing some stuff. I'll come back to that in just a second. Real quick, let me grab that metallurgic infuser. And temporarily, I'm going to put this down somewhere, again, that has some kind of power. It really doesn't matter at the moment necessarily where it goes, so long as there is power available to it. We do want to make sure, though, that we don't send random junk in there. For this, all we need to do is get gold in on the left. For that, though, we do need to have either enriched gold or gold dust, and enriched gold is also made with gold dust. And so I think it should just be a case of crushing some of the gold that we have and then taking the gold dust that we get from that and running that through our enriching factory. That is going to get us enriched gold, which we can then go ahead and throw directly into our metallurgic infuser to give us the gold we need to actually make the netherite dust, which we can then smelt into netherite ingots. And once again, our system has handily made all of the items required for another dimensional ore extractor. And so I guess, once again, I'm going to duplicate this setup here right next to it for zinc. So quick change of plans. It turns out that this is not going to work because zinc has to be mined. It does say it in the quest book here, but I didn't read it. It says it has to be mined in the nether. So if we want this to work, you'll see here, it says dimensional whitelist nether. So we have to set up the same system that we have here in the overworld, but if we want it to actually work, we have to build it over in the nether, which is not too difficult to do initially because, of course, all we need to do is put down these same machines using the same copy-paste gadget, but just in the nether. So I can go ahead and unanchor here. I can go through the portal, and I can fairly easily place them down. However, the problem is going to be that if we want to actually use it, we have to run all of our other stuff here as well. Like we need to get the sulfuric acid over to here. We need to get the nitrogen over here. Everything that needs to be done as part of this setup needs to be brought over here. And so I guess real quick, what I'm going to do is probably build a bit of a platform here, maybe clear out some space. I did put down, of course, a bunch of flight blocks to allow us to get around over to the Crimson Forest, but we could definitely do with some space. I'll throw down the lineup. We might end up rotating it to kind of come down this way. And then I think we're going to have to do a quick pivot into the quantum ring from AE2, which has kind of been mentioned before. It works in a similar way to the wireless connectors here, but it allows you to access your AE2 system cross-dimensionally, which I think is definitely going to be useful for this kind of endeavor. And it's also, again, going to be one of those situations where, as I've mentioned before, I think we're going to want to pivot away from using XNet to move things like purified water and instead use something like AE2, because that's also going to allow us to use AE2 to then send it across dimensions into the nether as well. And so, real quick, if we want to make the quantum link chamber, I think is what it's called, we can press G here and it shows us this guy, the quantum bridge. To do that, we need quantum rings and we need quantum link chamber. We do have to make two of these, one in the overworld and one in the nether, which means we're going to need 2 of the quantum link chambers and then 16 quantum rings. The quantum rings are a little pricey, but nothing too crazy. It looks like we've taught most of what we need here. And then the quantum link chamber is also not too bad, actually. So let me throw those in here, and then let's see if we can't request everything we need. So in terms of the quantum link chamber, that seems like the easier of the two, and it is. And then as far as the 16 quantum rings are concerned, we're actually just missing 8 charged Certus quartz, which should be fine, so long as this is working. It does say device offline, though. Oh, and that's actually not true. It is working. It's just making that kind of slowly but surely. So it's just going to be a case of waiting for the 5 extra to come in. That's fine. We'll go ahead and request like 12 for now, and we can request the extras once we have the charged Certus Quartz for it. I guess if we wanted to, we could go ahead and speed this up ever so slightly by doing something like this. That's going to increase the speed at which the Certus Quartz makes it to the charger, which is just going to make it ever so slightly faster at producing charged Certus Quartz. In fact, it looks like we do already have enough charged Certus Quartz to request the final 4. We do. Cool. And then the slightly tricky part about getting this to work is that we do need singularities. Thankfully, this is not going to be too difficult for us because we're already making singularities down here. And if I'm not mistaken, we actually just need one of these. And again, if I'm not mistaken, I think we just need to blow it up with ender dust. Let me check in here again. It's probably going to mention what we need. Yeah, we need a quantum entangled singularity. And to make a quantum entangled singularity, you blow up a singularity with ender dust. That is indeed correct. And so, thankfully, ender dust has been taught. We can go ahead and request one of those from our system. And TNT should not be particularly difficult for us to make. Now, thankfully, AE2 does add tiny TNT. However, to make the tiny TNT, we're going to need gunpowder. And gunpowder is something, thankfully, we can make with flint. That is tremendously useful. Let me quickly crush some of that over in here. And then let's make our tiny little TNT after we request the dust for it. Perfect. We're then going to need some kind of lever or button or redstone device to actually activate that. And then it should just be as simple as putting this down somewhere and blowing it up. Now, we do want to make sure, I guess, that if we do this, that we don't blow it up in such a way that it then falls through the abyss. That would be bad. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something like this. Put down the tiny TNT, put down the singularity, put down the ender dust, turn that on, like so. Then it should blow that into 2 quantum entangled singularities. And those are basically linked together. And so the idea here is that you put one of these in the one ring that's in the overworld, you put another one in the ring that's in the nether, and those two are just intrinsically linked because they were made with the same TNT explosion. And so now, if we go and grab all of our quantum doodads, we should be able to just kind of make this work. So let's give this a try. Where is my nearest cable? It is not close by, but what I'm going to do something like this and build our first quantum ring right here. We do need to connect this up to our network. And so for that, let me see here. I'm going to kind of connect it up like this, I think. Then we could do something like this. That's going to connect that up and should bring it online. And now we just need to do the same thing over in the nether, and we should be kind of good to go. Before I do that, one thing that I was made aware of is the fact that our wireless crafting grid, which is currently here, does have the option, if we press Z to open this, in the top right, we can put in a quantum bridge card. And I believe that the quantum bridge card is going to allow us... Oh, I might need a 3rd ring for this, actually, because I think the way this works is that I think if we press G on this, the quantum bridge card is an upgrade card for the wireless terminal. It allows linking your wireless terminal to a quantum bridge. Put a quantum bridge card and a quantum entangled singularity in your wireless terminal, and put the other singularity in a quantum bridge connected to your network. Your wireless terminal is now quantumly linked, and you can access your network from anywhere, even across dimensions, assuming the chunks containing your network are loaded, and it will automatically recharge with energy from your network. Both of these are really good things, but to make that happen, we would have to get another quantum ring, like a 3rd quantum ring, with another set of quantum entangled singularities to link to our wireless crafting grid, which I think is something we should do, but I guess that's going to have to go on the back burner whilst we get this other ring set up over in the nether. And of course, I will do that just as soon as we get another curio, because mine is now gone, and just as soon as I get that aforementioned platform actually built in the nether as well. Alright, so back here in the overworld, I'm going to use our dimensional infuser here to make the dimensional nickel that we need. There it is, perfect. Back over in the nether, I have gone ahead and placed down a little platform here that is, you know, nothing to write home about currently, but we have our dimensional ore extractor. My initial plan here was going to be to use the copy-paste gadget to paste down the entire lineup of machines, but the Twitch chat does make a good point, actually, in that the smarter thing to do here, I think, is probably going to be to give this power, which we can, of course, do with a quantum entangler porter, But then using the quantum link chamber here, which we can of course go ahead and place down, ideally putting things down in the right place the first time. But if we do one of these and one of these, we can then throw in our quantum entangled singularity here. We can also throw in another quantum entangled singularity right about here. That should link those two bridges. And now, if we were to go ahead and get an external storage, my thought process is that we can actually just go ahead and generate the zinc ore in the nether and then bring it back through the quantum bridge with an external storage in the nether and then just an exporter here in the overworld. That way we can put the normal line of machines down over here in the overworld, meaning that we don't have to worry about getting everything like oxygen and hydrogen chloride and purified water and sulfuric acid over into the nether. It's going to be much easier to just bring the one item back as opposed to sending all of the other fluids through to the nether. And so to make that work, we just need a storage bus. I keep calling it an external storage. It's not called an external storage. It is indeed called a storage bus. With that, we should be able to put one on here. We could even have it, of course, like go out into a storage drop. I think putting it on there will also work. I am going to swap this to be not bidirectional. I'm going to make it extract only, because if you set it to bidirectional, the system might try putting things into here, which is not what we want. Instead, what we want is to make sure that we have enough Fluix cable, of which currently we do not. That's fine. We can very easily request quite a bit more of that. And then if my cooldown has not run out, which it almost has, there we go, we can then go ahead and do something like this. And that should just connect that up. You'll see that it does say device online, which is a good sign. It means that has connected through to our main network. I do believe that that does use the same channel though, by the way. Like I think that is going to use a channel from our main controller. It's not like a separate channel system, so the channels do still function as usual, which is something to bear in mind. But now all we need to do is grab a quantum entangler, and that should allow us to give power to this system and hopefully start generating that zinc ore. And it does. Nice. So, as always, we could put a machine frame in here if we wanted to generate things faster. I don't think, at least not yet, that we need the zinc coming in that fast, but this should totally work. And so now I'm going to go ahead and set up this line of machines using the copy-paste gadget over in the overworld. And of course, we will set that up to receive the zinc and process it all through into its own storage drawer. Okay, so we've got 8-dimensional zinc, which is accessible here in the overworld. I've gone ahead and thrown down another line of machines just to the left of our platinum here. And now, if I go ahead and tell this export bus that I've put down to export zinc, making sure that this, of course, is set to input at the front, which it is, that's going to receive the zinc, which is good. Over here, we do have sulfuric acid, which will go in. The only thing that's currently missing from this whole setup is power, which thankfully should be one of the easier bits for us to take care of. We can just run some more basic universal cable, especially if we do a quick shift here and swap this from normal to fast. That's going to allow me to break these much quicker, and then using the universal cable that we already have on us, we can go ahead and kind of connect these up, and hopefully that should begin processing the zinc, and it should make some zinc ingots for us. Never mind, it helps if you actually hook up the last machine. There we go, that does now have power. It's still not receiving sulfuric acid. It does show here that the sulfuric acid pipe, it says empty. It looks like it has sulfuric acid in, but I think that is like a visual glitch, because I think it actually doesn't have any sulfuric acid in, and it looks like we might need to actually increase the speed of this rotary condensator. Thankfully, that should not be particularly difficult. Let me get some more energy upgrades, just to kind of offset the speed upgrades that we're going to put in. We probably should have had energy upgrades in there from the start, to be fair, but if we do this, that's going to bring our power usage way down to 2 FE per tick, and then even speeding that up to the max, that's way too much power. 50,000 FE per tick is crazy. Let's try just 2 of those. 2 of those is 25 FE per tick. That might be fast enough. We'll see if that's fast enough. It looks like we're gaining sulfur in most of these now, which is good. We can always put more in if we need it, and it's not using 50,000 RF per tick, which is good. So here we do have the zinc slurry there, which is perfect. Of course, again, there are little things like the connector for purified water that do still need to be connected up, but I think, for the most part, this is going to work and should allow us to go ahead and make the empowerer. And the good news as well is that going forward, zinc is an element that's required for Hellish Technium here. So we are going to have to make an unlimited amount of zinc gears, and so this is kind of a necessary part of the automation of the next tier of Technium. Alright, and again, we now have a full setup. I've put in all of the factory installer upgrades, I've put in all the energy upgrades, a couple of speed upgrades, some chemical upgrades here and there to make things function just a little bit better, and I've connected this up with more frame trim so that we do have zinc available to us. And so, with that, going back to the empowering quest line, this quest wants me to get a zinc ingot. Quest complete. So now, this quest should be available. It is. I'm going to bookmark the single battery. I'm going to bookmark the double battery. I'm going to bookmark the display stand. We need 5 of these, 4 to put down around the empowerer, and then 1 to actually make the empowerer itself. And I don't know if it's necessarily worth teaching our system how to do this. I don't think so. If we're going to make these, though, we do need the netherite. And of course, over here earlier, we did set that into motion. We got 10 netherite dust, which we can then go ahead and smelt, of course, into netherite ingots. Let's whack you in here, and we'll turn auto sort on. In fact, it's probably going to be way faster. We should put some speed and energy upgrades in there, but we do have our compressed furnace over here, which is probably going to be quicker at processing that, at least currently. And then in terms of making the single battery, this requires Restonia crystals, which you make by dropping redstone in front of the atomic reconstructor, that being this guy over here. We also want some Anori crystals, which in this pack are made by dropping nickel, again in front of the atomic reconstructor. So if we just do something like this and like this, those should both get zapped into a full stack of each. I don't know if we necessarily need a full stack of each, but redstone and nickel are both resources that we have in very large quantities, so I'm not really going to worry about it too much. And so let's make a single battery. I think we might only need 1 of these. The double battery then requires the single battery with more Anori crystals and an advanced coil. The advanced coil seems pretty straightforward. Black quartz and Restonia can be upgraded to gold with gold nuggets, which we can craft because apparently our gold is not in a compacting drawer. That's fine. Let's do you, and let's do you. And then from there, the empowerer requires just 2 more ultimate technium machine frames, which I'm assuming we have the capability to make. We do. Fantastic. And then, of course, we need the 5 display stands, which needs 5 netherite ingots, which should now be ready over here. They are indeed. We actually have twice as many. And then we need to get 15 athetic quartz and 15 athetic green quartz. The athetic quartz is made by zapping a block of quartz, which we can do. We did use a lot of our quartz earlier for the unstable matter, but again, thankfully, we can just enrich even more black quartz here to get even more nether quartz, and then, of course, craft that up into the blocks. The athetic green quartz is kind of the same again, but we need to get chiseled quartz, which we can make by crafting quartz slabs. So it's a bit of a roundabout method here, but if we get, first of all, 15 of these, let's go ahead and give those the old zap in front of this guy. Perfect. That gets us the athetic quartz. Then we need to get the green athetic quartz, which means we need to take these, and again, I think we need 15. We then need to craft them into slabs, and then we can craft the slabs into blocks again. With the chiseled, we can then zap those. That's going to get us the green, and at that point, we should be good to go. So let's do 1 of these. Atomic reconstructor, like so. Fantastic. And with that, we should have everything we need to make 5 display stands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we can use 1 of those display stands to make the empowerer. Nice. So that is most of that done. Annoyingly, the quest did not complete when I had the double battery. That is unfortunate, but thankfully not a deal breaker because we can make another double battery fairly easily here. Perfect. That should complete both quests. It does. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and put this down up here for the time being. We'll do something like this. And if I'm not mistaken, you need a 2-block gap like this between the empowerer and each display stand, like so. We then do need to get power to every one of the display stands. And so what I think I will do is probably place a quantum entangler porter under here. We could, of course, place one under every single display stand if we wanted to, but I think it's going to make more sense for me to just make sure that all of the power sides here are set to output. Auto eject is on. That should fill this guy up with power, and then from there we can just use some universal cable to run power to all of the rest of them, and then of course just use some facades to kind of cover that up. In fact, we might be able to go through the center here like this and kind of just run it like that. I say that with a bit of trepidation because I think it's also possible we might want to import under here or export to the empowerer here. So I think what I might do is do something like this and kind of run the universal cable around the empowerer, because the empowerer itself here doesn't actually require power. It's only the display stands. And so if we do something like this, and again, if we swap this to fast, it would be at least a little bit quicker. There we go. And with some facades, we can just go ahead and cover all this up. So now, going back to the organic quest line, we should be able to use the fluid injector. I say use the fluid injector. We need to make another fluid injector. We could use the one we already have, but I assume that it's going to make more sense to get another one for lava than trying to reuse the one that we have here for nitrogen. And then we can use that to make blaze powder, although we're only using this as far as getting one blaze data model. And so with that in mind, it actually might not be a terrible idea to just reuse the one we already have instead of making a fresh one, because we won't necessarily need it for that long. Let me go ahead. If I break this, does it retain its inventory? It does not. Okay, we did lose some nitrogen there. I think that's fine. We've got a decent amount of nitrogen backing up. Over here, I'll throw this down like that for now, and we can just go ahead and take some of those crimson planks, which we get from our crimson stem, throw those into the fluid injector, and again, with some power, which I guess for now we can get via a quantum entangler porter, we can then use this to get those lava planks. Those lava planks then need to be crushed into blazing sawdust. Of course, we do have a crusher available upstairs. Boom. And once we have the blazing sawdust, we then need to use that on the display stands with gunpowder, which we do have from earlier when we made the tiny TNT. So the recipe here does require 4 blazing sawdust per blaze powder. And if we're going to get the blaze data model, we need to get 2 crates of blaze powder, so 18 in total is what we're going to need to make the blaze data model. We are also going to need to get this nether data model. I believe the quest for that is back in the empowering quest line. So back over here, if we want to make a nether data model, we need 2 super empowered crystals. You get 9 of these from a block of super empowered crystals, and the block of super empowered crystals is made by combining the empowered Enori, Restonia, Palace, Emeradic, Void, and Diamantine crystals. So we need the empowered version of all of these, and all of these are made with the empowerer using a block of the original crystal. So the Enori is nickel, the Restonia is redstone, the Palace is lapis, the Emeradic is emerald, the Void is coal, and then the Diamantine is diamond. So we need a block of each. We then need to zap that block. Then we need to get different blocks around it. So for example, for the empowered Palace here, we need sapphire and lead. The Enori was pretty straightforward. It's just quartz and iron. And so the thing is then, we might need quite a few of these. I'm wondering if it's worth doing this a little bit in bulk, or at least as much bulk as we can, because we need multiple of each of these. We need quite a few of the nether data models, because looking at the organic quest line, we do need to get a wither skeleton data model, and a magma cube data model, and a blaze data model, and a gas data model. And then on top of that, if we want to make nether stars, we also need this right here. We need mob infusion with the nether data model and the wither skeleton skull. And so we're going to need at least 5, I think, of these nether data models, which means we need at least 10 crystals. That's awkward because that's basically a second block. It's almost something we could make with 1 super empowered crystal block, but just not quite. So we'll take 2 blocks of quartz. We'll also take, you know what, we'll take 4 blocks of quartz. I will go ahead and try and make 2 of each block if we have what it takes to make it. We then need 4 blocks of iron, thankfully much easier. And then we just need the Enori, which we did make excess of earlier. And so if we just craft up 2 blocks of Enori crystal, it should then just be a case of putting those where they need to go over here. So if we do this, and we do this with the quartz and iron, that should just work. You'll know it's working when you see the particle effects, and when the particle effects finish, we get the empowered block. Nice, so we can repeat that, boom, boom, and we can do the same with the iron, of course, boom, and boom. This should be fine. We have diamonds. Emeralds we don't have, though. Emeralds are going to be tricky for us. Up until now, I actually have no idea how we came across our first emerald. We can make emeralds using antimatter and diamonds, but we would need to get 18 of them. Is there a emerald ore that we need to extract? I think that's probably true, but we would need like 96 emeralds to get the dimensional emerald ore. Obviously, at that point, we get an infinite amount of emeralds, but that is going to be a little pricey, but I think it's probably just what we have to do. Let's see if we have enough antimatter to make that work. It's also going to use a lot of power, like a lot of power. Surprisingly, by the looks of it, more like the limiting factor here isn't the amount of power we have, it's the amount of power our basic universal cable can move at a time. So this is going to work, it's just going to take a while to get there. I guess we do need to put in the other half stack here to get to the 96, so we need to get there eventually. For now, I'll just throw a hopper on here and let that kind of slowly work away in the background doing its thing. And eventually that'll get us enough emeralds to make the dimensional emerald ore, and we can add that, I guess, up to the setup up here to get that going as well. With that though, I don't know if we're too far away from the Hellish Technium. We of course do need to make the Hellish Technium block. This bit is actually fairly straightforward, like we have almost everything to make the actual machine. From there though, building the machine also doesn't seem too bad. We need so many blocks of super empowered crystal. That is a little crazy. This kind of solidifies that we definitely do need to get the emerald ore extractor though, because otherwise there's no way that we're going to be able to make this many blocks of super empowered crystal. It's just not going to happen. But once we have this built, looking at the actual Hellish Technium itself, it doesn't seem too bad, because the blaze rods, the gas tiers, the nether stars are all acquired through data models. I think the same might also be true, yeah, for the magma block as well. So those four are all through data models. The zinc is pretty straightforward. We're already making the zinc. We just need to run it through our smeltery to get it into zinc gears. Brass, I assume, is kind of the same. I'm assuming we just have to make brass as an alloy between copper and zinc and then turn that into plates. That also seems pretty straightforward. Red nether bricks is nether brick and nether wart. Nether wart we can grow, and nether brick we can make with netherrack and regular brick. So there's definitely room here for making that automatically, and brick is obviously just clay. That seems pretty straightforward. That really just leaves the block of netherite, because everything else looks like it should be doable just with a bunch of nether data models and some simulation chambers and some loot fabricators. The netherite looks a little tricky. The chat has just informed me that for the netherite, we need to get an ancient extractor. That's down here, I see. So once we get this mix of debris, we can then make an ancient infuser, and the ancient infuser can be used to make the ancient debris. Now, if I press G here, this is another structure that requires even more of these super empowered crystal blocks, so we do need a lot of those going forward. And then with that, we can then turn lava and antimatter into ancient debris. Fair enough. But again, that doesn't seem too bad, but maybe I'm being overly optimistic. Either way, that is going to have to be a problem for future Isaac. Next time, we'll come back, we'll look at getting a lot of this up and running. I'm assuming we're pretty close. By pretty close, I probably mean like less than halfway on the emeralds. Yeah, they're coming in slowly but surely. But by the time we come back, we should have enough for the emeralds. We should be able to start getting some of the empowered crystal blocks. It looks like, given how many we need, it's probably worth investing in automation to automate the production of those empowered blocks. I don't know how hard that's going to be. Hopefully not too difficult. We can also hopefully look at getting that heat protection 3 curio next time as well, so that we don't have to do too much more heat curio crafting in the next episode. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this episode of Techopolis 3 there.